Hello, I'm Nate and welcome to my online tutorial on how to build a command console style terminal in React.js. Now what you can see there on the screen is we've got a command console that will respond to various commands. It's also scrollable and it will auto scroll to the bottom as the user types. So if we just go ahead there and start creating our app with create React app and the command line, wait for that to install. I won't be installing any of the dependencies, it will just be a React app straight out of the box as it were. This project is also available to download on GitHub, so you can go straight over there and grab the code if you want to. And the link for that is just in the information section below the video. So if you're ready, just pop open VS Code or your editor of choice and we'll get straight into it. So to start with, if you just get rid of that app CSS import and the logo, we won't need those anymore. And go ahead and delete all the HTML, which is auto-generated by create React app in this function here. And once that's gone, we'll just go and change the class name of our div there to container. And we're adding one of our components there, or the main component, which is going to be called console. And even though we don't have that yet, we'll add that next, but we'll just import that at the top. And now we'll go ahead and make our command prompt component, which is called prompt. And literally all this is going to do is return the text for our command prompt. So for the purpose of this video, we're just going to call the prompt. And it's just going to be a very basic one-line function there. Now obviously you can call this whatever you want. It's probably worth having a bit of a play with it once you've got it all set up so you can see just how much space it will take up on your line. And now we're going to set up a custom hook which is going to handle all of our our key presses. In particular, it's going to handle the enter key press. So when someone presses enter, whatever they've typed in is going to be evaluated by this custom hook. It's also worth noting that all of the stateful components in the app are going to be using hooks. There won't be any of the old class-based components. And what we're going to do here is just set up an object to hold all of our commands, and we'll use bracket notation to access these later, so when someone types in a command they get the relevant response. And if you're not familiar with custom hooks or creating custom hooks, the convention is to prefix the names with the word use. So we're calling this one use on enter as it's going to be handling our enter key press. So we're just going to create a bit of state here using react.useState, and the state will hold an array and a method for updating that array. And we're going to use this piece of state just to keep track of what the user has typed into the console. And now we're going to set up the method which is actually returned when the hook is used. Basically this is going to take in the value which actually will be typed into the input, and then also the key that has been pressed. So when a user presses a key, what we're going to do is just check to see if that key is the enter key, which means they've entered a command. So once they press enter, what we're going to do is just do a little bracket notation lookup on the commands object that we created earlier on. Now if that command exists in the object, we're going to return the value, and if it doesn't, we're going to return invalid command. So now we know whether we've got a valid command or not. We're just going to concatenate that response to the console output array, which is what will be returned to our console component once the user has entered a command and pressed enter. It might just be worth mentioning at this point that the reason we're making this custom hook is just to keep our main console component a bit tidier, a bit easier to read. You could also abstract that commands object, especially if it gets quite large, you have a lot of commands, you could put that elsewhere. And now what we're going to do here is just return our console output array and the onEnter method, which will then be sent through to our main component. And now we're going to get started on the console component. As you can see, we've already got some imports there. We've already made prompt and use on enter. We'll be creating the map console output component a bit later on. And what we're going to set up first is a reference using react.useRef. And what this is going to refer to is our text input, where the user will type in commands. And all we're going to use that for is for resetting the text input and adding focus to it when the component renders. Next, we're just going to set up our use on enter custom hook. And what we're going to do next is just set up react.useEffect. Basically, this is a method which will take a callback. Everything that's inside that callback will be run every time that the component re-renders. And what this does is kind of replace the functionality that we used to have with the old class-based lifecycle events. What we're using it for here is just to reset the input text value and also apply focus to the input as well. We want this to happen on every render. So when the user presses enter, it looks like the command has been accepted, and re-adding the focus reapplies the cursor. And I'm just going to set up some HTML within our component, just a few sections and a couple of divs. This is going to be quite a simple component. Here we're just going to add in our map console output component. We're going to be making that next, and that's going to take in the console output array and then just map it out onto the console display screen. You can see we're just putting our prompt in there, and this is the prompt that will appear in front of the actual input, the input text box. Just setting up our ref in there. Might be worth mentioning the difference between refs and state. So that refs won't actually trigger a re-render, whereas obviously state will. And we're going to pass a callback function into the keyPress attribute here. What that will do is destructure the event that we'll receive from the keyPress. And what we'll destructure that into is the target value in the key, where the value is going to be the value from our text input, and the key is going to be the key that was pressed, which we are hoping is going to have been enter. Alright, so next we're going to set up the component that's actually going to map through the console output. So we've got this array which comes from the custom hook with all of the commands that have been entered into our console, and we're going to display all of those in like a list form, just so it looks like like a console. When you type into a console, you have all of the output from it on the line above. So hopefully that's what we're going to try and replicate here. What we're going to set up first there is just destructure the props that are sent through to the component. And then what we're going to do next is just set up another use React ref, similar to our input text ref. And this one is just going to handle the scroll position of the HTML element which holds all of the console output, just so that it looks like an actual terminal as we type, it scrolls down the page. So what we're actually going to do here inside our useEffect callback, first of all, just to set up an if conditional to make sure that scrollref.current actually exists, and then we're going to apply the scroll height value to the scroll top value. And what that's going to do is every time that the component re-renders, is that box that contains all of the console output, that list, that's going to get scrolled to the bottom every time the user presses enter. So what we've just done there is applied our scroll ref to the console output div. That div will have to have overflow set to scroll, just so that that scrolling functionality will work. And now we're mapping through the results from our console output array. I'm going to add index as well as the iterable item into the console.map methods arguments there, just so that we can use index as a key for our child elements. So what we're going to actually do here is map through all of the commands that the user has typed in and display them above the currently active text input, so as to mimic the way that a console works. So what we're going to have to do is display the prompt in front of each of those commands which has been typed in. And once that's all set up, we should be ready to give it a test. So a quick yarn start in the console, and we'll be able to see what it currently looks like. So at the moment you can see we've got no styles applied, but the basic functionality of the console is there. But as we don't have any styles yet, if we keep typing in, our prompts are just going to keep appearing down the page and they're not going to scroll as we want them to. So let's dive into our index CSS. We'll set the background color to black, and then the actual text color to white on the body, so that should apply to everything except for our input. We're going to set up the container which is going to house the actual console. This is in the root of the app, and we're just going to set that to flex and justify that content to center, just so it centers the whole console. Give it a little bit of padding. And the console output is the div that holds all of those map results from the commands that the user has typed in. The important thing is there that it has to have the overflow set to scroll. I've given it a width as well, just so it makes it a bit wider, but that's up to you. As it sounds, input prompt holds our main prompt and our input. Again, I've decided to make that wider. Now, this is the class for our main console div. It's important this is flexed column, and that the items are aligned to flex start so that the input and the output both sit in line with each other. And next comes our input. We're going to have to set the colours as they won't inherit from the body. Also set the border to none and also the outline to none so that when it's clicked on you don't have that outline, the focus. And here we have our end result. As you can see, as you type in, that box that contains all of the results, all of the commands, scrolls upwards automatically as you press enter. I've deliberately made the height of the console quite small just to demonstrate that scrolling effect quite easily, but you can just adjust that with CSS to suit your needs. And that concludes our project. If you have any feedback, please let me know in the comments. And also, if you do end up using anything from this tutorial in any of your projects, let me know. It'd be interesting to see them.